Hello everyone, and welcome to a new series I'm starting called Tier 0 Terrors. I've always been interested in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh, so I wanted to try my hand at discussing the coolest part, Tier 0 formats. For those out of the loop, a Tier 0 deck is one that makes up at least 65% of the top cut at any event, and is generally known for being overpowered or unfair, hence the title Tier 0 Terrors. Today's Terror is not the first Tier 0 deck in Yu-Gi-Oh history. That honor goes to Yadalock from 2004. However, I think GOAT format gets enough love and coverage, and I like dragons and psychic types, so instead I'm covering the Terror from 2008, Teledad. If anyone ever tells you modern Yu-Gi-Oh is too expensive or full of overpowered combos, point them in the direction of this $3,000 synchro spamming dragon deck from the past. Phantom Darkness was a core set from 2008 that contained a multitude of powerful strategies, but none came close to Dad, Dark Armed Dragon. Alongside Dad were several other cards that helped the Dark attribute, namely Dark Grepher, Armageddon Knight, and Allure of Darkness. Dark Armed Dragon had to be special summoned by having exactly 3 dark monsters in grave, and could banish 1 dark monster from grave in order to pop a card on field. Armageddon Knight could dump a dark monster from deck to grave on summon. Dark Grepher could be special summoned by pitching a level 5 or higher dark monster from hand like Dark Magician of Chaos, and could pitch a dark monster from hand to dump one from deck. And Allure of Darkness could allow you to draw 2 cards at the cost of banishing a dark from hand or discarding your entire hand if you didn't have a dark to banish. Before Teledad, there was Dad Return. The deck focused on using Dark Grepher and Armageddon Knight to load up the graveyard to summon Dark Armed Dragon, then use Dark Armed Dragon and Allure to banish dark monsters, which you'd later combo with Return from the Different Dimension to swarm the field and OTK the opponent. Many later Dad Return decks, namely the one that won SJC Columbus, Ohio, started running a Destiny Hero engine to manipulate the number of dark monsters in graveyard with Disc Commander and Malicious, as well as put up a powerful skill drain on legs with Plasma, and Stratos acting as the hero glue to hold them all together. This is when everything changed. In May of 2008, there was an emergency ban list that hit many of the top decks. Dad Returns was one of these decks, suffering the loss of Dimension Fusion, the limiting of Return from the Different Dimension, and the semi-limiting of Allure of Darkness. After that list, you'd think, oh, with hits like that, Dad Return decks are dead now, right? And you'd be absolutely wrong, as just 9 days after that ban list, SJC Nashville was held, where 14 of the top 16 decks were still Dad Return. But change would eventually come with the release of the next core set after Phantom Darkness, Light of Destruction. In this set came the Lightsworn archetype and a new Gladiator Beast monster, Gyazaris, the latter being the one card required to make Glad Beast a new rival to the dominant Dad Return decks. Just a mere 11 days after this set released, SJC St. Louis was held, where you could see the format evened out more with Glad Beast taking up 6 of the top 16 spots and Dad Return making up 4. So now Dad decks are done, right? Wrong. Dark Armed Dragon would manage to remain relevant by now having 2 different decks run it, Dad Return and the new Dad Turbo, which was a variant not playing Return from the Different Dimension and instead focusing on draw power to get out Dark Armed Dragon as soon as possible.
At the 2008 US National Championship, the combined Dad Return and Dad Turbo decks would make up as much of the top cut as the top deck, Gladiator Beasts. Similar results were seen at the European National Championship, where Dad and Gladiator Beast would be the top decks overall. The next few SJCs all continued to have Dark Armed Dragon related decks top.
Come September, a lot of changes to the game occur. Primarily on September 1st, 2008, Dad Turbo and Dad Return were both hit by the new ban list, suffering the banning of Democ, Disc Commander, and Premature Burial, and the semi-limiting of Phantom of Chaos and the dragon itself, Dark Armed Dragon. So, that was that. No more Dad decks running around the meta wildly. The reign of terror was finally over. Wait, what is that noise? Dear God. The Duelist Genesis brought so many new things to the game. Not Synchro Monsters though, as those were released in the 5D starter deck, which predates this set. But what came in the Duelist Genesis was the new Psychic type, a type of monster that had above average effects that came at the cost of paying life points. The most notable Psychic-type monsters being the level 2 tuner Krebons, who could pay 800 life points to negate a targeted attack on it, Psychic Commander, which could lower the attack of a monster battling a Psychic-type monster by paying life points in multitudes of 100, Magical Android, who, during the end phase, gained you 600 life points for every Psychic-type monster you controlled, including itself, and Thought Ruler Archfiend, who allowed you to gain life points equal to the attack of a monster it destroys in battle, and, at the cost of 1000 life points, could negate a spell or trap that targets a Psychic-type monster on field. These and the other new Psychic-type monsters were strong, and made even stronger by one of the most powerful spell cards at the time, Emergency Teleport, which could summon any level 3 or lower Psychic-type monster from deck at the cost of banishing it during the end phase, as if the card would ever stay on field long enough to see that happen. Like a match made in heaven, Emergency Teleport and Dark Armed Dragon finally came together to create one of the most powerful decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! History, Teledad. Finally, we've arrived at the Tier 0 terror itself, Teledad. 4 days after the release of the Duelist Genesis, SJC Baltimore was held, where, to no one's surprise, Teledad made up 8 of the top 16 spots. Surprisingly, Gladiator Beast would take the first place and triumph over Teledad in this event. However, the power of Teledad shouldn't be doubted. The second place deck, piloted by Jeff Walker, ran Armageddon Knight to fill the graveyard with darks, a smaller Destiny Hero package to manipulate the number of dark monsters in the graveyard and get more draw power, and obviously the new Psychic-type engine. The combo basically worked like this. Summon either Armageddon Knight or Dark Grepher, dumping any dark monster in your graveyard with their effects. E-Tele for Krebons. You can now make Goyo Guardian with Krebons and Armageddon Knight, or Grepher. You now have 3 darks in grave, meaning you can bring out this deck's namesake, Dark Armed Dragon. This deck's incredible power and popularity only grew as 21 days later, SJC Tulsa was held, where Teledad showed its true strength by not only getting first place, but also taking up 11 of the top 16 places, making up 68.8% of the top cut. The first place deck, piloted by Adam Korn, notably improved as it narrowed down the psychic count to just 3 copies of Krebon, changed its hero package to incorporate Diamond Dude and Doomlord, played searching staples like Mystic Tomato and Sangan, and added Snipe Hunter as a chance of removal and more importantly as a way to pitch a dark monster into the graveyard. The next few SJCs all came to similar results, Teledad taking first place and making up an incredible number of the top 16. One interesting thing to note is the top cut of SJC Chicago, which initially doesn't seem different, but upon closer inspection will reveal a new deck called Twilight taking root. Twilight is a special variant of Lightsworn that incorporates a small dad package of 1 Dark Armed Dragon and 1 Phantom of Chaos. You might be wondering to yourself, how are they running Dark Armed Dragon with so few dark monsters in deck? The answer is simple. This deck hoped to mill dad through any of the Lightsworn effects and then use Phantom of Chaos to banish it and copy its effect to pop a card on field. Innovations in Dark Armed Dragon related decks wouldn't stop there, as the next core set would change up the strategy a bit more. Crossroads of Chaos would release on November 18, 2008. With it came 2 new cards relevant to dad decks. Plague Spreader Zombie, a tuner monster who could place a card from hand to top of deck in order to revive itself, banishing itself when it leaves the field, and Black Rose Dragon, a generic level 7 synchro monster who was a board wipe on summon and could banish a plant from graveyard to force an opponent's monster into attack position, reducing its attack to 0. These 2 cards would see play in most dad decks going forward, as Plague Spreader was a tuner that also let you control the number of dark monsters in grave, and Black Rose was just a generically good card. At SJC Atlanta, Plague Spreader would see play in the first and second place decks, and Black Rose would see play in the second and third place decks. Also in the top 16 was a new and interesting deck that was forming, Zombie Teledad. Zombie Teledad was exactly what it says on the tin, a zombie deck also running Dark Armed Dragon, Krebons, and Emergency Teleport. It used its zombies to control the number of dark monsters in graveyard, and Card of Safe Return to draw as much as it could. The final event of 2008, SJC Detroit, would bring a major shift in the meta as Teledad was finally dethroned. Just kidding, it made up 11 of the top 16 spots. Also important to note was the incorporation of the very rare new battle staple, Gorz the Emissary of Darkness, who changed how players would battle from this moment onward. Stephen Harris's first place deck was especially interesting as it brought back Psychic Commander, which could be used with any level 4 to make Black Rose Dragon. The next 2 SJCs would go exactly as you expected, with Teledad continuing its incredible reign of terror. But things had grown stale in the community, and sadly all good things must eventually come to an end. Come March 1st, 2009, a new Forbidden and Limited list would drop and kill Teledad completely. Now limited were Dark Armed Dragon, Plague Spreader Zombie, Goyo Guardian, Card of Safe Return, Emergency Teleport, and Reinforcement of the Army. But it didn't stop there, as Destiny Draw and Golden Sarcophagus would also be semi-limited. The effects of this list were truly felt at the next event, SJC Anaheim, where Teledad would make the top 16 but not be anywhere close to the overwhelming majority. Gone were the days of this dragon being the dominant deck, and here to stay were all the new decks that finally had a chance. And that's the story of Dark Armed Dragon. It would remain limited until October 14th, 2019, where it would be semi-limited, and then finally free completely on January 20th, 2022. 4 years since then, give or take a few weeks, and it hasn't really done anything in the metagame. It got a Ghost Rare printing in Ghost from the Past, The Second Haunting in 2022. I bought a ton of those, and I sadly never managed to pull one. Regardless, I hope you all enjoyed this video and hearing about the history of this game. I'd like to make more videos like this in the future, either discussing entire formats or just the history of one specific card, so I hope you look forward to those. Thank you so much for watching.